podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Friday Night Lights at the Abbey Stadium. It wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't. I'm not entirely convinced it was the football apocalypse, though. The next day's Schadenfreude Express. Schadenfreude Saturday? Is that a thing? Are we calling it that now? No, that's not.
Well, is this Sky?
Exactly.
Do we have to brand every segment?
It kind of sets our performance in a slightly less damning light, doesn't it?
Actually, I'm not sure it does. The context is that United are still in the FA Cup and a whole bunch of other teams aren't, and that is good for United because presumably we'll spank Cambridge at Old Trafford. You'd like to think anyway, and Van Gaal's side will be through to the fifth round, and there won't be too many other good teams left in it. You know, Liverpool, we'll see what Arsenal do on Sunday. And so that context is good. It doesn't alter the performance, I don't think, and I think... it's not relative to other teams, really. It's just relative to United and Cambridge. And in that, United just weren't good enough to beat a League Two side. And that's pretty damning.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal. What do you put it down to?
A whole bunch of factors that we've discussed this season. So insistent on playing players out of their natural position. So quite a few. Obviously, we had two at full-back. He went back to a back four. It didn't actually change the speed with which United built up, did it? All sorts of problems in midfield. So basically, Fellaini was playing on the right wing. Januzaj was playing in central midfield. So two players definitely weren't comfortable. Although I thought Januzaj had a decent game for a player who's barely played this season. The ball's just not getting into the front man very quickly. I'm certainly no advocate of knocking it long, but I think there's a big difference between possession for the sake of possession and possession that's penetrative. There's Barcelona 2008 to 2011 kept the ball, but there was so much great movement up front that they created tons and tons of chances and scored loads of goals, didn't they? And this was like late stage Barcelona where the cancer had set in and there was just no movement left anymore. And so United had the ball and it went sideways, and there were just no options. And, sure, Cambridge just tried to defend, but what do you expect? It's a League Two side. How many times did United actually penetrate that or try to switch the play or try to draw Cambridge out? I have to say it was a really, really disappointing attacking performance. And then you look at the defensive performance and United could have conceded goals, really could have.
Yeah, they could have scored as well. The Cambridge keeper did pretty well a couple of times. It was interesting because United finally looked fluid when Herrera came on late in the game. And it almost seemed to me like he was what the game was desperately missing. I don't know if that's rose-tinted spectacles or whatever, that thing of when a player doesn't play, they often become the solution in your head, don't they? Gareth Barry with England in World Cup 2010, has to be the most extreme example of that.
Yeah, well, look, Herrera's a good player, and he's the kind of player that can move the ball very quickly, and he's a good attacking player and he's a good defensive player, and I think he'd have added a lot. And I think, honestly, Louis van Gaal got the selection badly wrong. So, it almost looked like a selection that would have played a 3-5-2 type system, but then it ended up playing with a 4-4-2 and a diamond in midfield, and so you had a couple of players completely sort of lost in that midfield. It was just very odd, really, and as soon as Herrera came on, suddenly United started moving the ball more quickly, as you'd expect. It was better, not brilliant, but it was definitely much better. So I wonder whether Louis van Gaal just made this odd selection based on sort of height, and they thought, League Two side, it's going to be physical, therefore I'll get Fellaini in the game, and that was exactly the opposite of what was needed because it kind of dragged us down to their level.
That was the thought process that seemed logical. It was interesting because generally, I think this might be the first game where Van Gaal's made the exact substitutions I wanted him to make. That doesn't tend to happen very often, but kind of, I don't know, when Herrera was warming up, it was like, there's no way he's going to take Fellaini off at this point, is there? But that was obviously the player to take off. And he did, and then he took Wilson off. I was kind of scared that he was going to take Falcao off, but Wilson did not have a good game, but in terms of selection, that's another one, isn't it? Because it wasn't really set up for a pacey player, that game. It needed the ball to move quickly, but there was no room for players to actually move quickly, was there?
Well, I think he was just trying to stretch the game a little bit, but Cambridge, at least in the second half, didn't try and move the ball forward too much. I mean, in the first half, they actually created some good chances, and especially with Donaldson down the right, and thought Champion was pretty energetic through midfield. So sort of that triumvirate of McGeehan, Champion and Donaldson looked like they were better players than League Two standard, didn't they? At least United allowed them to be, and they looked quite dangerous on the break. And Donaldson put in a couple of decent crosses from which they created some chances.
Yeah, and obviously, it's completely self-evident that United's performance was nowhere near good enough. But the reason that I said at the beginning that I'm not convinced it's the football apocalypse was not actually because of what happened the next day. I kind of felt like that at the time. It's one of them games, right? I mean, the problem is we've had too many of those one of them games, and there are systemic problems, and the Cambridge United game feels more intense than it would normally have done because it comes in this kind of broader context of us struggling and Van Gaal struggling to get things to work and appearing to make a number of errors. But first of all, he did ditch the back three, which everyone was freaking out about the whole week leading up to it, and people kind of accusing him of stubbornness and all this kind of thing. And then second of all, not to use a cliche, but freezing cold rain at a League Two ground against a team playing, as if their very lives depend on it because it's genuinely the biggest game of most of their careers, and we weren't up to the task. And it's that's not good, but nor is it the end of the world. Not being able to muster up a performance in those circumstances. There's so many times when people kept going on about, see, Van Gaal's no better than Moyes, and I was thinking, do you not remember Alex Ferguson against lower league teams in the early rounds of the FA Cup in the last 15 years?
Sure. Honestly, I think you have to divorce that from, I think you have to divorce the Twitter experience from the game, right? Because right at the moment, you're talking about the reaction of people on Twitter, right? And forget that. This, in truth, was a very poor performance from a United side playing a team 76 places below them. Right? These are players who couldn't, and what you've just described there are players who couldn't get themselves up for a game of that nature, and that's pretty disturbing, I think. Van Gaal's had more than 6 months in the job now, and he still hasn't worked out what his best 11 is. He still hasn't worked out what the formation is. He talks an awful lot about philosophy. I have no idea what it is. He's pragmatically going from one game to the next. I'm not sure what this is leading to. The 4 came in at the back. Why did it come in the back for this game? Are we going back to 3 against Leicester? What's the thinking there? Because there doesn't seem to be an obvious pattern. He played 4 at the back and then he played 2 midfielders in fullback positions. Is it because he doesn't trust Shaw and Raphael? Valencia was utterly dreadful. Stayed on the pitch for 90 minutes. Rojo had a great game. Jones looked insecure every time the ball went near him. Looked like he hadn't been in a dust-up for a while, didn't it? And so there's just so many questions that the game itself brings up. And sure, it's not the apocalypse. United didn't go out. It doesn't mean that Van Gaal's getting fired in the morning. It doesn't mean I think he should be fired. But it just adds to the weight of evidence that things are not progressing as quickly as we thought they might do under Van Gaal. And worse than that we're not even sure where they're progressing to. Because that's not obvious yet. No,
I totally agree with that. I thought Jones, another one who sort of improved as the game went on. You're absolutely right. He looked really shaky early on. It felt like he kind of grew into the game. He's still on corners.
Yeah. Can't work this one out myself. He did manage to get one corner past the first man, but one corner. And I think, I'm not sure how many he's taken over the last 2 games or so, maybe 6 or 7 or something, I'm guessing.
I think it's fewer than that, but yeah.
But I think he's only managed to get one past the first man, I think through recollection.
I think he's running at 2 out of 5 or 2 out of 6. Still not good, but anyway.
Yeah, it's obviously something they've been working at Carrington. I guess they don't see him as a big enough asset in the box, and he can strike the ball, but it's not striking the ball anywhere near a United player. They'd be better just keeping the ball, to be honest. It's odd that they play this sort of ultra possession football at the moment. And we know penetration, yet they just want to launch it into the box unsuccessfully. So they might as well just keep it if they're going to play that way. Honestly, coming back to this issue about what does the Cambridge United result kind of show? It shows that United desperately need to be able to find a new creative system because it's not working at the moment. And, Van Gaal was obviously talked about having a twitchy ass in his Friday press conference, and he's worried about playing in a back four, and he's worried about United's defensive side of United's game, and that's fine. He's gone safety first this year because his goal is fourth place. Fourth place is pretty anxious, I'd say, because United could end up playing a German or Spanish side in that qualifying game. So, he's gone a bit cautious. Maybe the time will come in 18 months' time that will go, do you remember that time when United played really defensively under Van Gaal as they're piling forward, scoring 5 goals a game? Great, maybe. But right now, he's not got the balance right. He's swung back too far to the defensive side of United and not able to move the ball quick enough into attacking areas. And, there's 16 chances created against Cambridge and 6 of them on target, and a couple of good saves from the keeper. It doesn't feel like it was enough against a team of that quality.
No, it clearly wasn't. The pragmatist thing is fascinating to me. Like his comments about his biological twitches were funny, and they were received quite positively because they were funny, but they're not so different. When you think about what that's saying, it's like I kind of want to sit him down and go, you're the Man United manager, you've got to get used to that twitching. It is part of the job. It's like this is part of the Manchester United identity, whatever the heck that means, is that we like it. We don't mind if it's a bit dodgy, just go for it. And earlier in the season, he was certainly doing that. It's fascinating to me this season. I was thinking about the story of the season so far and how much of the season swung on that second half against Leicester. It feels like Van Gaal's kind of been in with post-traumatic shock since then, and the overcorrection, because we just don't concede anymore. We barely conceded any goals. Everyone keeps going on about how desperately we need a central defender in the transfer window, and I think, well, we definitely need we need prime Nemanja Vidic, but it's not to make us more solid defensively.
We do so he can go back to 4, yeah. I mean, it's so he can change the system and so the central defender will be there to make United more solid attackingly. It didn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. I talked about it before, how Ferguson liked to play 1v1 in defensive situations, so he could overload in more positions in an attacking sense, and could break very quickly. Now, the exact opposite is happening with Van Gaal at the moment. United cannot transition from the back to the front quickly, and they're just not. It's structural, as well as the fact there's a complete lack of pace in the team when Januzaj and Di Maria aren't in there, and that's obviously why Wilson's getting a lot of games too. So he's definitely got a problem. Hate to talk stats and heat maps and all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of instructive. If you take a quick glimpse at United's heat map, so little action taking place around Cambridge's box. So little. It's all in midfield, and United had over 700, nearly 750 passes in the game, which is Barcelona-esque. Unfortunately, Barcelona do that against Real Madrid, not Cambridge. But and loads of players with a ton of touches, except the forwards. So Falcao, Wilson and Van Persie between them had 41 touches. Between them. Phil Jones had over 100. So it's really instructive of how difficult United are finding it to get it into the attacking third at the moment. It's all in the transition. It's a big problem. And it feels at the moment like Van Gaal is just hoping it's going to fix itself.
So my question at this point is, structurally, why is that happening? Why is it that, okay, in this game Mata didn't play, but, this is not particularly out of the norm for what United have been like. But why can't, say even in this game, Di Maria and Januzaj and Michael Carrick get the ball to the forwards? What's going on that's stopping that happening?
Well, it's all central. So they've got 50% less players in wide areas. Against Cambridge, it's slightly different because they had no players in wide areas, really, because Shaw and Valencia actually were finding it very difficult to get into those positions with any kind of space. But for the most part, when United are playing 3-4-1-2, it's all very central. There's only 2 players in wide areas, so 50% less options to stretch the play, and that's all a bit predictable. And when they're playing Van Persie and Falcao up front with Rooney in behind, there's very little pace too. So one stat this week that had a list of the fastest players in the Premiership, and Antonio Valencia was top and Wayne Rooney was about 5th, and I was like, really? at some point when Rooney had clocked like 30 kilometres an hour or something, at some point, it was probably when he was chasing a left back or chasing back in left back to make a tackle so he could get a few cheers, because it's definitely not in an attacking sense. So, random Rooney dig there. He didn't even play against Cambridge.
He's still got
still find a way to have a go at him. But there's just no pace, right? So it's not as if United are going to knock it over the top. It's impossible to do that. So it's all into feet and it's all very central. So I think it's pretty easy for teams to defend against. And it's predictable in a way that Moyes' teams were predictable, but of course, Moyes' teams were predictable because they always chucked it out wide and it always launched it into the box. So this one is always into feet, it's always short, it's always the same pace, one-paced, and it's always through the middle. And that just makes United very predictable. And I think we'd benefit a lot. Systems are kind of by the by in a way, but I think we'd benefit a lot from going back to a 4 and having more players in attacking areas that can attack wide areas. So if they just went back to a sort of standard 4-2-3-1 and got the players to do it, we'd be able to get players into wide areas as well as centrally. And the worry for Van Gaal is I don't think he trusts Michael Carrick to cover the ground defensively in front of those two central defenders. So he sees United getting overloaded in that area. And that's why he wants, a player of a physical and defensive nature. Strootman's been mentioned loads of times, obviously, to come and do that job.
There's a few things I think. The first thing I think is that one of the reasons we were so terrible against Cambridge is because with the way the system is, if the wide players aren't in form, we're bang in trouble. It is kind of, you were joking about it last week, but we've hugely missed Ashley Young because he was actually quite effective at moving the ball forward and changing the pace of the game. Valencia was so horrific against Cambridge. It's got to be one of his worst games for years, and there's been a few to choose from. It was really depressing. It's that sinking feeling every time he gets the ball of like, oh, this isn't going to be good, is it? One of them ones. Yeah,
and he got the ball a lot. He had the ball an awful lot, and it came to nothing every single time. I just don't. I honestly, I like Antonio Valencia. He seems like a nice chap, and he's pretty wholehearted, and I don't know. There's nothing not to like, right? He's not like he's held the club to ransom twice over wages or anything like that. He could hardly do that given his performances. But we've had so long since he was a really effective player, just so long, and you just got to wonder what the point is. It's kind of hard because you see too many of those players underperforming, too many of those players who don't feel like they would be in the side if Van Gaal had any other choice. But yeah, he's just spent £150 million. So what's it going to take? Another £150 million to turn this into a side that's a winning side again? It doesn't seem quite right. It seems like Van Gaal should be able to get more out of these players.
The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot is you just called it a 3-4-1-2, which is what it was earlier in the season. He kind of set it up so he could get as many of his great forwards in the side as possible, and you could play Mata at 10 or you could play Rooney at 10, but there was a number 10. But the recent back three hasn't been a 3-4-1-2, it's been a 3-3. You've had the three at the back, Carrick in front of them, and then two midfielders ahead of him. And you can line up the fullbacks wherever, the wing backs wherever you like in that formation. But
a 3-3-2-1-2.
Exactly. Well, no, isn't so 3.
Yeah. So you got two wing backs. You got Carrick all in a line.
Yeah.
Then you got two midfielders in front of them. It's been Rooney and another. Then you got the guy, Rooney and Fellaini or whatever, or Rooney and someone else, and then you've got the guy behind the two forwards. I see what you mean. He's actually sat it back a bit deeper. So
exactly, there's been less of the guy behind the two forwards, is what I'm talking about there.
This is why we don't do tactics on Rankcast, because we're not tactics.
We just can't count. But I mean, it's kind of it. We can definitely look at the tactics and say this is a much more defensive version of the back three, and that actually Carrick coming back into side was hailed as this wonderful turning point for United's season when he sort of appeared to steady the ship defensively, and Neville was very sort of keen on saying that Carrick would put these passes into Van Persie that Blint's not playing and all that kind of stuff earlier in the season, But actually, using Michael Carrick, as you say, we're having to make a lot of compromises in order to get Carrick in the system.
Yep.
And it isn't exactly making us a flowing attacking unit. So
no.
I do wonder whether it's worth looking at that position as kind of a bit of a problem area in terms of our use of the ball.
Well, it's a problem because Carrick's not getting into attacking areas to use his passing range. Then again, it's needed from that sort of quarterback position. In fact, I don't think Van Gaal should think about playing a back three without Michael Carrick in it, and then you have all sorts of problems in midfield because United aren't able to retain the ball. It's this transition, right? And you transition out of the back into through midfield, through the front, and United have a problem on the ball. Herrera's not getting in the side for whatever reason. I don't know. What is it? I mean, is he shagging Van Gaal's daughter? Is he not turning up to training? Is he just not showing enough? Because every time I've seen him, he's done enough that I think he should definitely be in the side. And this is the reason why he should definitely be in the side. He's one of United's better progressive passers, right? So every single time I would find a way to get Carrick, Herrera and Mata into the United side because they're going to move the ball quickly, right? And this is what United are desperately lacking at the moment. So I don't know. The Cambridge, to go back to the big picture, it's not a terrible disaster. United will beat Cambridge at home. It's not like they've got a fixture congestion problem, not playing in the Capital One Cup and not playing in Europe, so the squad can cope with it. It's going to be another 90 minutes for a few of those players who are short of fitness to get fitness. We're getting to the point where there's no excuses around injuries anymore. So it's not a disaster, and Chelsea and City are out, and so Southampton actually, and we'll see what happens with Liverpool in that replay and Arsenal on Sunday. United got a fantastic opportunity in this competition, so it's not a disaster, but boy, did that game throw up a load of questions for me in terms of where United are going, because I think he needs to find some answers and he's definitely not done it yet.
Absolutely. I totally agree that that's the case. The one thing that is, of course, happening is that people are asking serious questions about his competence, and that just seems crazy to me, but that is a fully each to their own situation, isn't it?
Indeed. Well, that was that game. Shall we talk competition winner?
Yeah, let's do that.
We a few weeks ago we said we were giving away a lovely print of Radamel Falcao.
Sorry.
Painting of Radamel Falcao. This is a one-off, I think, by mils-art.com. He's offered it up. Very nice it is too. Celebrating one of his goals. He's actually scored a goal this season, I believe.
3.
I find it 3. I find it hard to recall these goals, but this is celebrating a goal. It's a collector's piece because there aren't many goals.
I remember it like it was, I remember each one like it was a newborn child because they're so incredibly precious. Okay.
We'll remember these in 20 years. You remember when United spunk 6 million on that, that kid from Colombia? Because he's not staying permanently, is he?
There's time left to go in the season, even if George Mendes is basically saying, I hate Man United now, bye everyone, I'm going away and taking all my toys with me, including David De Gea, haha, see how you like that. At Blabberone says, this is the third place prize goes to at Blabberone, who says, when my comment got read out on the Rankcast for the first time, I went berserk, sort of like Falcao. That shameless attempt to curry favour there, almost worked, got him a top 3 spot, which is really not bad.
I think this is what kids call meta, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a little bit self-referential.
I like this one. At Matt Lewis 6 in number 2 spot with to be honest, I did a full-on Falcao when I successfully cooked a meal on my own. It was carbonara, so a double win. Well done, Matt. That's impressive work. I think Matt's a young man. Thomas Griffin at 9 Rifter says, correctly answering the tie-break question in the grand final of the 96 Chorley District Road Safety Quiz. Congratulations. Not only did you win that 1996 Chorley District Road Safety Quiz tie-break in the grand final, you've also won a lovely painting of Radamel Falcao going absolutely nuts.
Very nice. The irony is when he goes to pick it up from the post office, he'll probably get run over. I'm joking. I hope I haven't jinxed you there, mate. Because, predictions on this show do come true.
Yeah, we're famously accurate with our predictions on this show. So it's mils-art.com, and it's a beautiful website full of beautiful paintings. So if you didn't win the print, then with a painting, then well worth getting on there and seeing if you could pick yourself up something nice, because there's some lovely United themed stuff on there too. So And thank you very much for the lovely competition prize. So, talking of the listeners and their input into the show, should we do some Twitter questions before we do some newsy type things?
Let's go for it.
At Nightwink99 says, Di Maria can't handle a cold, wet Friday night match at Cambridge. Does he have what it takes to succeed in England? Yes.
Yeah, he has what it takes. I mean, I think there's more to come from him. There has to be more to come from him. £60 million, you know. I mean, he's a player who's dynamic, creates chances, and will continue to do that. That's what you get out of him. You push him far forward. I mean, Van Gaal actually tried to explain why he'd been using him in the striker's position because he wanted to stretch the game, but I think we found that doesn't work. I'd love to see Di Maria as one of the attacking three in a sort of 4-2-3-1. I think that's where he's going to cause the most damage.
I like seeing him as a 3 in a 4-3-3 as one of the midfielders in that 3 though as well, because
he's very good there too. Yeah, it gives United a lot of thrust from midfield.
And actually, he even did that against Cambridge. The end product wasn't there, but there were moments, you know, little micro moments where you see what is potentially to come. I think the system's not helping him very much, but I think he's certainly got what it takes. At Torkelage, TJ Christensen says, what about ditching Falcao for the informed Lyon's striker, Lacazette? He's Aguero mixed with the physique of Sturridge. I don't know. It sounds like Ligue 1 talk to me there. So
it is a little bit, yeah. No, I've seen the chap a little bit, not a lot, have to say. Lyon's president has been talking him up, obviously getting ready to sell Lyon. Definitely a selling club these days, and actually moved past the point where they were getting stupid money for stupid players, but they will sell him at some point. Probably not this January. He'll be flogged next summer for a decent fee. I don't think he's in Falcao's class, at least theoretically.
I mean, yeah, form is temporary. Form is temporary. At JSF_7 says, should we play in white more to confuse David De Gea into thinking we are Real Madrid? The thing is, there's no way he could have confused us with Real Madrid when we last played in white.
No, if you look at how Madrid are going these days, they're going great guns, easily the best side in Europe at the moment. Which, yeah, you can see why he might want to go. Sorry, I had to come back to Falcao because we've talked about him a bit. I'm going to go on the record. I think he's shot. I think this guy's gone. I think he will never be the player he once was. Doesn't mean he won't be a great player, but I don't think he'll ever be the player he once was. You know, the thing that, apart from the finishing, the outstanding finishing, which doesn't appear to be there at the moment, we'll just chalk that up to still being ring rusty 6 months into being at United. I think that explosive pace over 5 yards, he was never quick over 30, but he was over 5 to 10. It seems to have gone to me. So I don't think he'll ever be the player he once was.
Okay. Talking of players who aren't what they once were, at Steuge says, what's your favourite Darren Fletcher moment during his United career? It looks like Darren Fletcher is going to be off to West Ham United, where I suspect he's not going to be able to do that great a job, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any moments, but thinking about those Champions League semi-finals against Arsenal a little while back when he was absolutely outstanding before he got sent off. I think that was kind of peak Fletcher, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, my favourite moment, I can't think of a specific turning point, but the gradual transition from a kind of frustrating joke where people used to call him Fergie's son and all that kind of stuff into proving himself as a very valuable member of United's squad. I think that was a pretty big deal, and some of United's fans could learn a bit of a lesson from that transition when it comes to patience with players.
Well, there has been. There's patience and there's patience. Yeah, it took a very long time for Fletcher to become an important player. Of course, you know, Red Issue, you used to call him the Scottish player, which was cruel but funny as well. Because, you know, in his early years at United, he really wasn't at the same level as everyone else. He turned himself into a very effective sort of all-round defensive midfielder. Certainly not what he was when he was 16. He was definitely a more attacking player then. And, you know, he's had a very good career as a result. He's done very well to come back. I can't see him lasting at United beyond the summer. It seems like he might even go this winter with a few clubs apparently interested.
We used to complain, says at John Blaze, about the defence, but Van Gaal has sorted that. Maybe with time he'll sort the attack too. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've gone through that one, yeah. I think it's going to be a couple of players to sort that one out. I'm not sure he's got the the players he wants in order to find that balance.
At Saruman187 says, how many Man United players does it take to change a light bulb? I'm going to say it's all of them, because instead of just getting like Fellaini to stand there and turn the light bulb, he's going to get Mata and then like put someone on his shoulders and like get someone else to kind of run in and try and jump and screw the light bulb in. It's a joke about playing players out of position, you see. That's what I was going for.
Yeah. There's going to be 3 at the base. There's going to be 2 just
Yeah, I worked it out. You were definitely counting 1 too many players when you put 1 behind the strikers. I counted it on my fingers while you were talking.
That's very good. You got 12 fingers, have you?
At Tom McGee says, do you think City or Chelsea still have a chance of winning the FA Cup? Yeah, because all the refs are against us and that, and the FA and conspiracy.
Oh, God. Let's not get on to Jose. Jesus. I have to say, this is we've blown hot and cold on Rantcast over the years about Jose, mostly cold, I have to say. During peak Moyes, he seemed like a good idea. He rarely does outside of peak Moyes. That's the kind of thing that made sure he didn't get the United job, I think. The kind of embarrassing tirade about referees and conspiracies, and it's a load of nonsense.
And talking of a load of nonsense, at Devin Doherty 89 says, is Ander Herrera a myth?
Yeah, he might well be. Don't get it. Look, I don't think he's going to be the world's finest midfielder, but he's got lots to offer United, and there's something going on that I don't know about, which means he's not getting in the team more often than he should. And even when he puts in a positive performance, I cannot imagine that he'll be in the team against Leicester at the weekend. At
Phil Gatt says, on the 20th anniversary of the most infamous Kung Fu kick ever, should Cantona have aimed higher? It's interesting. I think about this Kung Fu kick sometimes, because I'm confident that if the Rantcast, not necessarily proud, but confident that if the Rantcast had been around 20 years ago, I would have been saying it's a disgrace. You can't be kicking fans.
I would have been saying, I think, everyone talks about the Kung Fu kick and they've underestimated the quality of the punch afterwards.
Yeah, it's true, because that Kung Fu kick looks great in the photos, but when you see he really just does use it to knock the guy off his sort of balance so he can lead into him with the punch.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a quality right-hander. Over the top. Good technique with the roundhouse. We can't not talk about it. 20 years ago, today as we're recording on Sunday. A, doesn't half make me feel old, because I remember this game very clearly. And B, I think over the years, we're able to have a bit of perspective. It was a cataclysm, wasn't it? It was the worst thing that had ever happened. I was listening to Jonathan Pearce's commentary from the radio, and he's screaming and shouting. You can hear him spitting into the microphone about how Cantona should never play football again, and that was the kind of reaction, And Ingar has written a piece for United Rant. I'll post it later today, in which he said even sober papers like the Daily Telegraph got in on the act. They apparently ran 2 editorials afterwards. One was on the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and the other was on Eric Cantona. Talk about lack of perspective. And that was it. That was the media. They went into a hyper frenzied state. And a lot of it was driven by Sky, of course, because that was, the beginning of their hype machine in a way, wasn't it? And they did it very successfully. And in the end, you look back on it and you go, yeah, you can't be diving into the crowd to kick people. That's definitely not on. But the FA were extremely duplicitous in how they behaved with United, and they did it only because he was a foreigner and because it was United, I'm sure, and because it had the kind of high-profile media attention. And then when you look back on it, you just kind of think, that was just a bit funny, really, as well.
I mean, it's got this incredible iconography, and it kind of turned out really nice for all of us that the guy he beat up turned out to be, a terrible, terrible bloke. That is quite convenient. It wasn't like some charity worker having a bad day or something. And it is interesting, talking about a conspiracy, that's kind of from the days when there genuinely was a anti-Manchester United agenda at the FA. Like, not necessarily because they hated Manchester United, I think that would be pretty reductive, but because United were constantly able to be used as an example because they were the highest profile club and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, and clearly that happened because behind the doors they'd agreed a deal for Cantona to miss the rest of the season, and then they went and added 4 months onto that in the ban. which was just extremely duplicitous, and there was never any kind of rationale behind that, just what they decided to do.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, it's interesting because that moment stands as a key part of the iconic legend of Eric Cantona, right? You close your eyes and you think of Cantona, and it won't be long before you see that image flash before you, because we've seen it so many times on T-shirts and posters and, all that kind of thing since. And, he gave that brilliant interview a couple of years ago when he was doing the New York Cosmos publicity tour thing, where he said the finest moment of his United career was when he kicked that hooligan, And so it stands as part of his legend. But of course, it shows the duality of Cantona, not just in that it showed him that kind of rage and impulsiveness that was in him, but also the fact that that's both his most iconic moment and also the moment he most damaged United, because we didn't win the league that season because that happened. And then
absolutely lost the league by a point. And I mean, he said afterwards, Eric said United would have definitely won the league if he had not been banned. And then he went on to say, but the same would have been true if we had lost Pallister or Schmeichel or Irwin or any of the others. Off on a tangent here, but look at the team that played that night against Palace. Wow. I tell you what, they'd give this team a good hiding. Schmeichel in goal, Pallister and Bruce in the centre of defence, Irwin at left back, who was at right back? Parker was at right back. He might have been the weak link. Kanchelskis and Giggs on the wing, Ince and Keane in central midfield. They'd give anyone a good kicking, and Hughes and Cantona up front. That's a team.
It's just ridiculous. I got sort of misty-eyed thinking about it. But yeah, it's really interesting that then the next season, of course, he came back and dragged United to the title, even though he came back 4 months into the season.
Yeah. So that 94-95 season was the only season he didn't win the league during his time in England.
And, it's one of those things where it's like, of course, it's a shame we didn't win the league that season. But ultimately, what memory would you rather have? Would you rather have yet another league title in the infinite parade of league titles, or that iconographic moment that stands as a kind of something bigger than football?
Well, so I get that. I think I'd still have the title. But but no, it's a huge moment in football, and it's a huge moment for many reasons. The iconography, the overreaction of the media and the FA, which was completely out of kilter with the general public, I think, the legend of Eric Cantona and everything he kind of stood for, and him as a player, So, of course, fantastic moment in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the truth. And I would have got fully, won't somebody please think of the children, if I'd been talking about it at the time. But in retrospect, it was a heck of a thing. I can't imagine we'll be seeing anything quite that iconic as Manchester United take on Leicester. Leicester, who have been in a dreadful run of form in the league, but continued the theme of Saturday's Schadenfreude by beating a team above them in the league, although fewer places than many of those upsets when they beat Tottenham, thanks to one of the most immensely embarrassing pieces of goalkeeping that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Michel Vorm having such a good game. And so I didn't know the scores. I was watching Match of the Day and I said to my housemate, what? He's far too good to be Tottenham's number 2 is Michel Vorm. And then that happened at the end.
Yeah. Leicester aren't in that bad a run of form, They've won 4 of the last 6.
Oh, really?
Just one defeat in 6, yeah. So, they beat Tottenham, they lost to Stoke, but they beat Villa and Newcastle and Hull and got a draw at Anfield. So.
Okay, well, completely ignore everything I said. I don't know why I had that in my head, that they were still struggling. And they obviously had gone through a very poor patch of form, haven't they? But clearly come out the other side of it, and they've not got rid of Nigel Pearson, which they were talking about doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Leicester's a side of moderate resources, and they've come out from the Championship, and they've kind of patched the side together, haven't they? A mix of small purchases and freebies and most of the squad that was around in the Championship. So, I think they're about where you'd expect them to be. Nigel Pearson's a good manager. He put together a very good side last year in the Championship. He's trying to bridge that very large gap between the Championship and the Premier League. And, if chairmen go around sacking the manager who got them into the Premier League all the time, then they'll get what they deserve, which is relegation most of the time. And they've got some decent players, Leicester. Yeah, they are certainly not going to score a lot of points in the Premier League this season, definitely, but they've got some decent players.
They're rock bottom of the Premier League at the moment, 3 points off safety. The game at, I was about to call it Filbert Street, but it's not been Filbert Street for a very long time. The game at the Walkers Stadium, it's not even that anymore, is it?
I think it's called the King Power Stadium. Yeah, that's it. You can't keep up with branding. Just call it Filbert Street.
Yeah, okay. The game at Leicester was, as I mentioned earlier, a sort of horrendous turning point in our season when for half an hour I genuinely thought we'd win the league for that half an hour. And it was like the second half was a sobering lesson that perhaps we weren't going to sweep all before us. I can't see it being anything like that game, either in terms of how good we were or how bad we were.
No, I don't. Although, look, they've got the players who can cause United some damage. Not least about 6 ex-United players, you know. Danny Drinkwater, Matty James, Richie DeLate, maybe 3 ex-United players.
No, there's that lad that played against Hull last season. What's his name?
There's Tom Lawrence.
Yeah.
Yep. There's also, of course, Kasper Schmeichel, and he almost counts as an ex-United player, you know, since his dad was such a legend until he went to City. Now we don't like to talk about him.
Nope.
So, yeah, lots of United links there. Nick Powell is no longer there, right? He was on loan, he couldn't play anyway, and I think he went back to United. So
yeah, Nick Powell, whose career we'll come on to at some
south
point.
fast.
Yeah, trouble.
Yeah. So, look, they've got some decent players in Leonardo Ulloa. Is that how you spell it? Ulloa?
I think it's pronounced Ochoa.
There you go. It's double L. That doesn't sound right in Spanish.
I know, yeah.
That chap, he's going to cause United some problems if Leicester get enough of the ball. They probably won't have much of the ball, to be fair, at Old Trafford and the system United play these days. But, you know, he's good. He's very good in the air, isn't he? And you'd expect that would cause any combination of United central defenders some problems. So I expect United to win and win reasonably comfortably, but Leicester, as I said, you know, they're not in that bad of run of form, and going to Tottenham and winning the FA Cup will give them a super amount of confidence, and it shows that they're a half-decent side. Yeah,
absolutely. Talking of a half-decent side, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever what Van Gaal's going to do, whether he'll go with the back three again. I don't know. It would seem regressive to do so, but it could happen, I suppose. I guess some of it depends on who's fit up front and whether Van Persie came back and he looked okay, I thought, actually. His little cameo. Falcao didn't have a bad game, but it wasn't quite happening. All the questions remain. Who knows what Van Gaal's going to do with either the formation or the selection in this one?
Yeah, and I can tell you, and I think that tells you an awful lot, right? You know, it's good to be unpredictable in many ways, but I can't tell you that there's an obvious formation or a selection that Van Gaal will pick, or even close to it, because I'm not quite sure that he knows what direction he's on at the moment.
No, and I wonder whether we'll get any more guidance. I wonder whether the first Leicester game, having been a horrendous turning point in the season, maybe this Leicester game will be a wonderfully positive turning point and we'll put together a decent performance, because we definitely could. There's so much talent available to United, and there have been occasions this season in which it's clicked, and it's not impossible that it could happen, but nor is it impossible that we could put in a really disjointed and disappointing performance. Those things seem, 40-60 to me.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a 3 at the back. I think that's what he'll do. I think he'll head back to that for the Premier League, and but I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for United.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm just picking numbers out of the air, really, at this point, because I've got no sense of what the pattern of the game's going to be or what kind of team we'll put out. But I'm going to optimistically plump for a 2-0 win, because we don't really concede many goals these days.
Very good, yeah.
So thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Rantcast. We'll be back at, I was about to say the same time next week, but what I of course mean is some sort of vaguely similar time, depending on our schedules. If you want to get hold of us in between now and then to complain about Ed's brief bit of Rooney bashing, you can get us on Twitter. I'm at UTD Rantcast and Ed is at United Rant. We're both on Facebook at facebook.com/United Rant, and you can read what I've got to write on the Bleacher Report and what Ed's got to write on unitedrant.co.uk. If you want to support the show and send a bit of love our way, you can do so at unitedrant.co.uk/donate. Thank you very, very much to everyone that's done that. That is super much appreciated. And also appreciated is if you could hit the subscribe button on iTunes or whatever podcatching software you choose to use.
Very good. Is it called a podcatcher? I suppose it is.
Yeah, I think so.
Leave us a review. Tell us what you think. I had some extremely funny Twitter conversations with someone who was talking about the show last week who I happened to know through work circles who didn't know I did the show. Yeah, I don't necessarily keep it a secret, but I suppose I don't often use my full name on the show, do I? So it's people don't put that together sometimes. That was quite amusing.
Did they work it out during the course of the Twitter conversation that you were you?
No, I dropped him a DM and said, "Hi, it's me."
Brilliant. And shout out as well to Chris Rocks, not Chris Rock, but Chris Rocks for some very thoughtful emails on subjects that we discussed last week. And whilst we might not necessarily agree with all the points, it's always nice when people are prepared to engage in a civilised way about opinions, isn't it?
It is. Is this a bit where you were bashing foreigners, Paul?
I don't believe I was doing that, was I?
No, maybe not. No, especially not since you're a cheese-eating surrender monkey Frenchman.
Absolutely, and proud of it.
Very good.
Indifferent to the concept of nationhood, more accurately.
Very good. That sparked quite a debate, I think, on the show page and a little bit on Twitter. In fact, the thing that really caught the imagination, though, was which United players would be in the United boy band, which went on and on and on for quite some time.
It did. I'm so disappointed in myself that I didn't include Juan Mata in the original lineup when he's such an obvious candidate.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think he's boy band material. He's just a bit short. They're
all short. That's all famous people are short, Ed.
Well, this is true. No, I think he's the dude at the piano writing the ballads.
Yeah, maybe so. Actually, he might have left the band to do kind of more edgy music, but really it's not edgy at all. It's just him with an acoustic guitar, so he thinks it's edgy, right?
Very good. Well, carry this one on Facebook and Twitter if you like. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Sorry that United weren't able to bring a win for us this week. Otherwise, we might have been having a more positive conversation. So there are plenty of questions for United to answer. Van Gaal in particular, I think. I'm assuming that we'll get a win against Leicester and we can be a bit more positive next week.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.